Good evening. Tonight I just wanted to go over some of Sam's response to Bret Weinstein's opening at the first Vancouver discussion with Jordan Peterson. And these discussions have proved to be very fascinating. And so what I'm doing at this point is I'm just going back and going all the way to the beginning. And the hope is that I uncover some things and get some answers. Because that seems to be the goal throughout for most of these guys as they're talking, and I think that's a great idea. If there's concerns to the level that there seem to be, then I think we'll find the answers within. Just a quick bearing in mind. Well, let's jump into this first. So this is about 3 minutes and 20 seconds into the first discussion. And I'll do my best to quote Sam here. I don't claim that this is perfect, but it's my attempt to try to capture what he said as much as word for word as I get. And so here we go. Let's see. He says he's thanking everybody, and he says, I think I'll just start by saying that when we first had the idea to do this, now some months ago. And then he references some of the reverb that's coming through on the microphones. Sam continues, when Jordan and I first decided to do an event together, that was after we did those somewhat ill-fated podcasts. And I joked that we would probably need a safe word for this event. So, with some laughter there, that safe word will come as no surprise as lobster. Or is lobster. And then more applause. Haha. So it's kind of funny. I'll have to look back into that. You'll know things are dire when you hear when one of us says that. But I want to express my motive for helping. So this is where it gets a little more serious. But I want to express my motive for helping to stage these events. You know, I reached out to Jordan, and it really was born of seeing him in conversation with people other than myself. And I saw him do a podcast with Joe Rogan. I saw him speak to Dave Rubin, and I saw him speak with Bret on Rogan's podcast. And I had so much admiration for him in those conversations. 90% of what he said in those conversations struck me as really wise and useful and well-intentioned, and 10% didn't. But I noticed it was clear to me that seeing these successful conversations with other people who I respect, I began to wonder that I might be the problem. And I think that I am the problem. And there was a lot of laughter there again, and applause. And he says, before you applaud, this is Sam, before you applaud, maybe I didn't mean that quite the way you took it. So it's kind of good-natured and lighthearted there. I think it's a good sort of problem for Jordan to have, because it's what happens on these 10% moments and what doesn't happen that I think made our conversation so hard. And there was stuff to clarify between us. And I look forward to doing that. And thank you, Jordan, for agreeing to do this. It's an honor to share the stage with you. And needless to say, having Bret as a moderator is almost an obscene underestimation of the role he should be playing on any stage. Because, as you know, he has been on my podcast, or has been on my podcast. And that was one of the best conversations I've ever had. So thank you for doing this, Bret. And then Bret thanks him. So I just wanted to briefly touch on this because I had done some videos prior to this giving my initial thoughts of concern and wonderment. There's many adjectives you could put in there regarding Sam, and even, Jordan and Bret a little bit too. Let's see. I really want to try to make some quick points on it. First of all, hearing things like this makes me want to go back and hear those other podcasts, the other discussions, and learn more about that. Now, in fairness, I want to be as fair as I can, because when he talks about the 90 and 10%, that's probably true of a lot of us, with a lot of people. We probably agree with about 90% of many people and then disagree with 10%. But that's something that's really typical in our world, in our societies. It happens all the time, and we can all live and let live and get along just fine. So when we're thinking back, when I'm thinking back to Bret's initial point of him, he's talking about, he's wanting the things that normally help us to make sense are breaking down. And I talked about that in the prior video. And so it's kind of like these initial statements might seem silly that I'm talking about, but I think they're actually quite critical if we're going to analyze these. And I think these are very much worth analyzing because of what is being put out there, because of the opinions and the assertions and all the things that go with it. I think is absolutely critical. So moving on, and forgive the pauses. The video is not broken or anything. I'm just going to pause here and there. So Sam is laying down a framework of, I highly respect these guys over here. And I really seemed to also respect you. So you can kind of get where he's going in essence. I think it might be a lot. I have a feeling a lot of it has to do with anything that might be religiously motivated, or with some kind of a background with faith or belief of some kind. Something that basically Sam disagrees with, something dogmatic, perhaps at its base or at its core, but that will be future things to discuss too. I did find it kind of interesting, the more I thought about this, when he says, maybe I'm the problem. That's actually, while he was totally joking, being a little bit self-deprecating there, I actually think saying things like that are actually things that we should all consider at times. This is something I had to do a long time ago when I was challenged very, very hard in my beliefs. I feel like I spent a lot of time listening to atheists and humanists basically go after my views, my ideas that I hold to be among what I would consider the better ideas. We disagreed, but it was in a setting where we could really hash it out, and I actually enjoyed it, but it was super unpleasant too, because along with the condemnation of my beliefs was, in essence, a condemnation of me. So the nature of a lot of religions would also hold within them the idea that if it could only just be not true, how nice would that be? There's a lot of people that it appeals to them to want to have these negative things be true, but I'm going off on a rabbit trail there a bit. Let's get back to this. He mentions that this is a sort of a good problem for Jordan, and that kind of made me wonder at first, like, what for Jordan? This is Jordan's problem. But I think I know what he means, what Sam means. Discussing what happens in those moments and what doesn't is what caused the problems, and they hope to clarify that. Now, my guess initially too is that Jordan's probably pretty clear on what Sam believes. Maybe not totally, and vice versa. I think that Sam's pretty clear on what Jordan believes, but perhaps not. My only concern there would be that when people talk of clarifying things, as long as they're not trying to do more than just clarify it, it would be kind of akin to saying, someone to Sam, you don't believe in a God, or talking to him, and then Sam clarifying, no, I don't believe. I lack a belief in a God, or I've had atheists say that. I won't talk about Sam's views right now. I'll talk about some other atheists I've spoken with, and they liked to be very clear that they lacked a belief in a God. So for me, there's my clarification. I totally disagree with it, but I totally respect that they have that view. And I'm clear on it now. Now I'm clear. So there we go. Moving right along. That seems pretty, I guess that's what might be oversimplifying it, but I also don't know that I am. I also don't know that I really am there. So clarifying is good. I did get a feel, though, in this set of discussions that there's seeming to be a little more going on there than just having discussions. There's talk of getting an ethic and frameworks and grounding. Sometimes there's a lot of discussions, and when people are on, in essence, diametrically opposed sides of the coin or viewpoints, or however you want to view that or state it, I guess what rises to the top at times like that is an ability to get along, and no matter what your view is, to have a view that you hold or beliefs that are within you that allow you to get along with other people. If you ever were to do something dramatic or drastic to people, and Sam goes on later in the discussions to give some examples of some pretty extreme, horrific behaviors, that would not be something that you would need to sit back and say, you know what, I respect your decision. I think that's okay that you believe that. Thanks for clarifying that you think someone should die for their beliefs or something like that. Like, that's horrific. We're not in confusion about that. So really, I think that it'll be interesting to move forward past this point. I just wanted to lay this groundwork and give a reminder of where it started with Sam. I love that he was honest, he's having fun, and while the tone, in actual tone, kind of like you hear a song or the sound of something, the tone can have a good tone to it or whatever. But when I say tone here, I'm also referring to, it sets kind of these comments from Sam in that 3-minute point and on until Jordan responds. I think it really sets a contextual or content kind of tone for the whole rest of the debates, as it should, because it's at the beginning. So I think that's really helpful. I think that the ending, he compliments people, he compliments Jordan, and then shares his concern. He went on to, he made it very clear that when you say, oh, I know, and this is one more thing that's kind of important, the particular things he said, that Sam was struck. It struck me as really wise. This is speaking of Jordan's discussions, other discussions. The things that Jordan said were really wise, useful, and well-intentioned, and 10% didn't. So if we take that at face value, and Sam might balk at this, but again, bear in mind, I've seen all 4 of these, so I'm looking backward just to help me find some meaning for what would explain the rest. And this does a little bit here, perhaps. I'm not being insisting or super black and white, but if you take this at face value, he says 90% of what you said was wise, useful, well-intentioned. 10% didn't strike him as wise, useful, and well-intentioned. The well-intentioned part, or wise, kind of concerned me more. It's in essence saying that the parts that I disagree with you don't seem well-intentioned. If you kind of just break that sentence down in just a literal, factual fashion. But surely that's not right, right? That doesn't sound quite right to say, to kind of in essence be sounding so calm and the tone is good and there's laughter and compliment here, compliment there, and there's like this 10% is not well-intentioned and 10% is not wise or useful. And I guess that's fair. Maybe I just can't see Jordan or others saying that really of Sam, even if it was true. It just seems like, so again, not to be overly critical of this, that's probably wrong. So I just wanted to share it, though, in case anyone is kind of on this journey with me to delve deeper into this, because these are some of the greatest minds. I'm complimenting that. These guys are smart. They're well thought out. They're deep thinkers. They care about the biggest stuff on the planet. A moral realist. Sam's described himself as a moral realist. I think one time I thought I heard him say a moral philosopher. And I find this all fascinating. Jordan, I know for sure he probably aligns himself a little bit with that too, along the lines anyway, in a general way. So there you go. That's basically the gist of what I wanted this video to be. And I hope to kind of break it down a little bit more as I look for a rationale and reasoning to help explain what I see throughout. Not like just in this. Those quotes I just gave, those are fair and fine. But I think that the details may be something that's worth reflecting back on later is all. So thank you for listening, and I hope you have a great evening. If you ever, or day, depending on where you are, truly and genuinely, I invite any thoughts or discussion on this, because I think this stuff is very critical. And I think that these guys are pretty persuasive, and they each have quite a following. And just the nature of these topics are such that I think that we each need to ask ourselves what's true, what's not, and what's beneficial, because these are the biggest things of life, and life is precious and flying by, and there's might be more to it, and you want to be on the right side of history, the right side of things. So thank you so much. I wish you the best. Take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.